Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of the Passionately Wrong podcast. This is James. I'm here with my co-host, Randy. And today we have the great delight of bringing onto the show another longtime teacher at Ash, who many of you will know, and that is Tom Kelley. Tom is going to describe for us, hopefully, some interesting anecdotes that, depending on the nature of those anecdotes, he'll change the names of the afflicted. But I'm sure we're going to have some fun. I think, Tom, you were inspired in part by listening to our session with Richard. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. Exactly. Yeah.
Nice of you to reach out. We're actually part of the fun for Randy and I is getting back in touch with colleagues and to have other teachers who were so important to us during those formative years is actually really a delight. And I'm sure going to be interesting to the people who are watching and listening. So thanks a lot for coming on. And maybe you can start by giving us, we can get into this in a couple of different ways. You've had an interesting background before you ever got to Ash, and maybe that's the way to start is the winding path that led to your being there the first time and the second time. And then we can take it from there if that works for you.
Sure. Yeah. The first time was because of a leak in our ceiling. So my wife and I were living in a pretty crappy place and the roof leaked. And we kept telling the landlord that it leaked. And he was like, so one evening we're lying in bed and I'm saying, well, man, it's my wife's thing. It's not that bad. We could take care of this. He's going to come and try to put it. And as I'm speaking, part of the ceiling falls on the foot of the bed. Crash. And I turned to her and said, okay, we're getting out of here. And that's when we decided, look, let's have an adventure. We don't have any kids or anything. We'll go to Europe or somewhere. And I had always wanted to teach abroad somewhere. I thought about it before I came from Massachusetts, where I had gone to school at Boston College and moved out to Oregon, where some friends of mine were, and got a job at a school called Centennial, where I taught for quite a while. And but that was nice. But this was a European adventure. What the heck? So I went to a conference down in San Diego. And in those days, this is long before the internet. So you have to imagine that people actually met in the same room so that you could talk to each other. I know it's hard to imagine, but that's the way we used to do it in the old days. So I go to this conference and the deal is there's a bunch of jobs here and there, Japan, Norway, The Hague, and Vienna. And so you go interview with these people and my wife sits by the pool, researches the next place I'm going to interview. I come down to the pool. She gives me a briefing like Vienna, it's spelled with a V. Okay, got it. Yeah. And then off I go. And so I had this interview with Gail Schoper for The Hague. And he said, oh, well, I want to go to lunch. So we went to lunch and he bought me fish and we had a nice chat. It was good. And then the next one was Vienna. So I get the briefing from my wife and I go up to the door and I knock on the door. Nothing happens. Knock on the door. Door swings open. There's a guy standing there in his underwear watching the Boston Celtics game on the TV. And I go, excuse me, I thought I had an interview with you for the chemistry positions. Oh, are you Kelley? Yeah. Well, I thought Gail was taking you. See, so the way it works is the guys, the big guys, they have lunch. They go, okay, everybody needs a chemistry teacher. Gail, you got screwed the last time. You take the Kelley guy. Vienna, you don't get the chemistry guy. You get the, they just portion us out like meat or something. Anyway, that was fine. I really did want to go to Vienna, but I never did. And Gail hired me and I went to teach and had you as a student, James, in The Hague.
And not me.
And not you, traitor.
Well, that's right. And those who may not have had all the backstory, this would have been in the mid 80s that you made your way
fall of
to
1984. I started at Ash in Scheveningen in the old, wonderful old building. And the chemistry room was way up. I think it's like the fourth floor, 40 something. The best thing about it was, you remember they had those individual toilets along the hallway. I don't know if they were like that on the other floor, but on the top floor, on the fourth floor, they were each with an individual door and a unit of some kind or other in there, whatever you wanted to do. And then a window that looked out into the courtyard. And the best part about that was that there was a woman across the way who used to like to sunbathe naked in the afternoon in the spring. And so lots of people had to go to the bathroom very often in that time period.
I don't
And you
remember
see,
hearing about that.
Nature was calling in a
you
way.
should have taken chemistry at Ash, Randy. But there's another
Yeah.
reason why you should be happy that you ended up in Holland and not Austria, because that probably wouldn't have happened in Vienna. I don't know, maybe, but
Yeah. See, there you go. And of course, I said we didn't have children, but wouldn't you know, as soon as I took the job, my wife got pregnant. So I was panic stricken because I'm just a stupid guy. So I write to Chopert because there's no internet. I say, I don't know what's,
And it costs $20 a minute.
we're going to have to just the baby's going to be born in February. I had pre-existing condition and health care. I don't know. So he makes a very expensive phone call. He calls me up. He says, Mr. Kelley, maybe you're not aware of this. They do have children in Europe. And I went, well, yeah, I guess so. And that was the end of that. So we came and we had, my son was born in Bronovo Hospital in February of 1985. Excuse me. And he's a Dutch citizen from birth. So a dual citizen, of course, but
Does he live in Holland or does he live in the States?
he lives in Australia now. Yeah. He went to school in New Zealand. That's the problem with this international school stuff, you know. I mean, if I had stayed in Portland, they would have gone, gee, I don't know if I want to go to Washington State or not. That's a long ways away. But when you grow up abroad like you guys, you're like, yeah, we're playing, basketball this weekend in Paris or, I don't know, London or something. I don't know. We're just going, your world is much different. So going to school in New Zealand was like, yeah. And now he lives in Australia. My daughter lives in Maine. She returned to the U.S. and we're out in beautiful Oregon. So,
Well, a lot of teachers in Oregon from my past. I'm not sure why that
oh, yeah?
is.
Quite a number of teachers here. I live in a golf resort called Sun River, and there's a lot of former educators here, especially from Asia.
You're near Bend, right?
What's that?
Near Bend?
Well, Bend is the big city of 100,000, but Sun River is about 15 miles south of Bend.
So I have a friend who lives in Bend, retired.
Oh.
In fact, we just interviewed him, Jeff Teagues. His episode came out 2 weeks ago. He was a prior Delta Force member, and he retired down there. And I would go down there every time I get to the States. I'm in Spain right now. Every time I get to the States, I go down there and I do he's a writer. So I spend 2 weeks editing and co-writing with him.
Wow, great. What does he write?
He writes, his book came out. It's called Where Have All the Heroes Gone? That's one of our episodes too. And he wrote a religious military mesh. It's really interesting. Relates his experiences in Delta Force and Green Berets with the Bible stories.
Wow, interesting.
two things you wouldn't normally think go together, but Jeff does a great job.
Oh.
Yeah.
How interesting. Well, good for him. Yeah, it's lovely here. The high desert, Central Oregon, we have terrific climate. It's sunny today. There's still some snow on the ground up here in Sun River. And in the summertime, it's nice and warm and dry. And it's really.
You and your wife moved to Holland in the 80s. You would have been late 20s, early.
We have to do math now.
All right, something around there.
Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing, did you have any surprises when you guys first moved there, other than the fact that Europeans also had kids? Was it as the Gail Chopert described to you, or were there any surprises in your couple of years there?
Always surprises. There's always stuff that you don't expect. What's interesting, I was 31 when I just did the math. The thing is, think of an example. Root beer. Okay. I like root beer.
Love root beer.
It's not like the biggest thing in the universe for me, but I kind of have the occasional root beer. Dutch root beer. Oh God. That's a terrible thing. It tastes horrible. It's really miserable. Why would you drink that? Yeah. In the school in Wassenaar, he was forced to sell root beer, but it's like, oh, geez, that's terrible. It's just different takes on things. How you do stuff. It's how you solve problems. If your roof leaks, what do you call? Well, you call the plumber.
Oh.
There aren't roofing guys. There's plumbers. Plumbers take care of the roof because it's all about lead or load. And loodgieter, lead melter, is a plumber, and they take care of water and stuff that leaks. So my landlady, our first year that we were living there, every time there was a big storm, she'd call the plumber who would come over and look at the roof and say, yeah, it's okay. So it works fine, but it's not what you would expect.
Yeah.
That's
Still had leaks in Holland?
Oh, weeks.
Couldn't get away from them.
You lived there and for a short while. You know what it's like there.
I don't remember having leaks in my house.
No? Well, we were in Scheveningen, right on the beach. Loch. So it was when the wind came up off the beach, it moved. Those tiles are heavy, but it moved them around. Sweet old lady, Mevrouw Nyman, and she just wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. So, but I don't know. So there's lots of little things where, everybody has the same approach, same problem to solve. You just do them differently, I think, is it? So there always got to be, and I think people that have a tough time would be people that in that example say, no, I need a roofer. Where's a roofer? Find me a roofer. No, bend a little bit here. Okay. See how it's done and go with the flow. It's a much happier experience. If you're trying to make everything like it was back home, you're going to be very disappointed and you're missing the whole point. You're not back. You're somewhere else. I always remember, I'm going to forget her name now, Gail's wife, who taught at the Rotterdam school. Wonderful lady. And she said, we've been abroad for decades, raised our kids abroad. And what I love is that you go out for a walk and there's an adventure around every corner. And that's the way you have to approach it. You have to go out and say, I wonder what weird thing I'm going to see today that's going to make me think, I never thought that eating a raw fish by holding its tail in the air over my head would be interesting. But what the heck? Let me give it a whirl.
It is useful to remind yourself that just observing the customs of the other people that are there, it might seem strange to you, but look, here they all are doing it, apparently having a grand old time. Maybe I'll try it.
Yeah.
So that attitude of whether you ultimately like it or not, being open to the idea that, hey, other people are doing it, so it's an acceptable method. If nothing else, I'll consider it. Is something that I see in the people who spent time at Ash much, much more than I do with other people. We've talked about that before. It just changes your perspective on the whole world, and you can never go back to the way you used to be.
No, exactly. Your horizons have broadened, and you think there's more than one way to skin a cat. There is that relocation roller coaster that a lot of those people talk about, where it's all fun for the first month or two, and then it starts to rain, and you get depressed, and you miss home, and you can't really contact your family. And by the time you get to early spring, you're ready to kill yourself, your family, and everybody. But then you go a little bit further, and you go, maybe it's not that bad. And you make a few adjustments and you climb back out of it, and then you're okay. You're in the long haul.
We had
To get through that, there's a downtime. And I would warn people who go abroad about that, to expect that there's going to be like, yeah, wait a minute, this is not all cherry blossoms. Fruitcake. It's tough.
Look, we had a discussion about this, I think, with Friedman about you're describing something that maybe our parents felt. I don't feel like the kids did. We didn't have a choice, right? We were there. We just made the best of it, went forward. And I don't remember ever having any of those roller coaster feelings. Maybe my parents did. I don't know.
I'm sure your parents did. I think all the parents. Yeah, definitely. This is an adult experience for sure. Yeah.
Right. And depending upon where one was coming from, most of us as students, you're there, you're 13, 14, 15, 16, and the freedom available to you at that age compared to almost everywhere else is remarkable, right? Make your way to school on your own. Oh, by the way, it's legal for you to drink. And oh, by the way, you can ride a moped. And it's like, it's fantastic.
You can have coffee in a coffee.
Well, right.
And then
all of those things.
And then you go back to the States. Some of the people went back to the States in the middle of the year, were all restricted, and they felt those kids felt depressed as they had lost all their freedoms.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so in one sense, Tom, your story is atypical in the sense that you had a 2-year stint and you actually observed your 2-year stint. You went back to the U.S. at the end of it. I've heard so many stories of people who said, we were going to go for 2 years and it ended up being 30. You did go back to the U.S. And how long were you back in the U.S. after you left Ash that first time?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. It was, what happened is that, of course, we had the child, and my poor wife, poor Ann, is there. She's in a foreign country trying to deal with the healthcare system. We don't speak Dutch very well. We're doing our best. And she doesn't have any supporting family, a few of my friends from school, but none of her own friends, no career. Her life got turned upside down for this adventure. And I'm having a great time teaching school and traveling and going watching some basketball. Yeah, it was great for me, but for her, it was really difficult. So the spring and the roller coaster. So along about, I would say this time of year, 1985, the baby's a couple months old and she's like, we are getting out of here as soon as possible, going back home. And I convinced her to look, let's spend one more year so we get the summertime and we could tour around Europe. We'll throw the baby in the Volkswagen van and we'll see Europe, which is the reason we came. And then do the next year, finish my 2-year contract, we'll go back. So that was the plan. And I convinced her to do that. She hung in there. Well, of course, things got better. We did the trip. It was what a great time we had. Lots of great stories from that, but I won't go into those. And we next year started. And of course, second year teaching at the school was a little better. I knew where everything was and I'd gone through it all once. So, and she had more friends and she started to get involved in an organization. They're doing some counseling, which is her field. So things got better, but we should have had this chat. See, hey, dear, what do you think? You still want to go back? No, I don't. And it came time. The way things worked in those days was that the school had to know in December who was coming back because the conferences were in January, February, and you hired your teachers for the next year by March at the latest. And so that you're set up for the next year. Now it's all done by Zoom conference, or whatever. So nobody uses it. But anyway, that's the way it was. So at the December meeting, you had to turn in this piece of paper that said you were leaving. And I really, all of a sudden I had this piece of paper. I was like, oh, yeah. Well, I guess we're going back then. Yeah. Okay. So I said, I'm leaving. And Chopin was really pissed that I was leaving because I was doing a half decent job. It was better than the guy I replaced who was really horrible. And by all accounts, I don't know. I never knew the guy. And so, and he had to go find a chemistry teacher to replace me and they're hard to find. So he was pissed and we left and went back to the States. And we got back, we bought a house, had another child. My wife got a job. I went back to my old job at Centennial High School, back to normal. Here we are back, kind of European adventure, great fun. Yeah, there you go. Well, after about 5 years of that, it was like things were not good in the public schools in Oregon. There was going to be a lot of cuts. Class sizes were going to go up. Now, it wouldn't have affected me too much in my job because I'm teaching this rarefied atmosphere of chemistry and nerds outside. So I would have been okay. But for my kid entering school, geez, classes of 30, 35, we don't know who's teaching anymore because people are leaving because there's no money and the facilities are terrible. One of the schools, the high school was closing early in the year because they had no money to finish the year. Portland Trailblazer basketball player donated part of his salary to keep one of the schools open. It was horrible. So we looked at each other and said, geez, it was fun over there. And it was a good school. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. I don't know, maybe. So I wrote a letter to Gail Chopin and I said, hey, so look, and I was thinking maybe we're going to come back abroad again. I want to know if I can use you as a reference. And then if you know of any place that's looking for a chemistry teacher, it'd be great. And Chopin said, yeah. So he opens my letter and reads it. And 30 minutes later, in his office, the chemistry teacher who replaced me walked in and said, Gail, I decided I want to go back to the States. I'm going to resign this year. And he said, okay. So I got my job back. I never had an interview again. He hired me twice for the same job and went back and there we were. But of course, in the interim, they had built this campus out in Wassenaar. So instead of the cranky old weird buildings that we were in that you went to, James, and I guess Randall, you went to as well, right?
Yeah, I was James. I was there in 83, 84, and 82.
Okay. Did you go to the high school or middle school or?
Oh, in 1 year middle school and then 9th and 10th grade.
You had Bill Britt and Henry Canello?
Don't recall those names.
They were science teachers. You remember science.
I had earth science and biology. Keep saying that, but I don't remember who my teachers were. Science wasn't a big deal. Was a big thing for me. It was. I barely got through it.
Anyway, so oh God, where was I? So
You were talking about the new school.
all those buildings were gone and empty. They knocked a lot of them down after and they built this beautiful campus. So I came to brand spanking new building. I'd never been in my life before. And it's just great. And beautiful counters, and lab space, just terrific. And I go into the prep room and there's beautiful cabinets storing everything. I open the cabinets and all the bottles have my writing on them, because they were all the stuff from the old building, of course. So all the stuff was familiar. The location was totally unfamiliar, but it was really freaky. The whole time I was there, I kept coming across stuff that I had written down or done in 84. And now it's, 2010. And I'm looking at it going, geez, I don't know. Weird. But it was nice. The building, and they've done a lot with the building since then, expanded and whatnot.
I was just going to say from that anecdote, and just to set the stage for people, that means in your second stint, it was quite a bit longer than 2 years. It was 22
Yes.
years or however long it was. Yeah.
Years. Yeah.
Okay.
I finally retired in 2013 at age 60, and I moved back here to Central Oregon.
Randy, I interrupted you. You were going to ask something.
So you had the beakers and bottles and stuff had your writing on it. Did you have, like, I don't know what you call them as a teacher, programs of instruction that that were probably still used by your predecessor or whatever?
Yeah, stuff, worksheets or curriculum materials that I had done that she had used, and then made a few notes on it. And then boom, there they were, still there with my stuff and her stuff on them in the filing cabinet. Pull them out and go, oh, look.
That's good. I mean, they respected your work and they just said, I'm going to use this. This is awesome, right?
Oh yeah. Well, teachers are famous for stealing from each other. Oh, well, it's well understood. Oh, that's good. I'm going to take that.
I have a similar experience. I was in Peru doing anti-drug kind of mission, and I was the first one there. And I said, hey, I need to make this into people can do what I'm doing. So I made this like smart book, we called it, with all the points of contact and how we're going to do this and phrases in Spanish. And then I got the same job 2 years later, and nothing had changed. My book was there. No one had added anything to it, but I did when I got there. I was like, this could be updated. And then I came back 2 years later and it was still there, but it's a good feeling.
Well, see, it must have been good stuff.
So Tom, you also served as the science department chair for some period of time. And
Yes.
That sounds nice. What did that mean actually? And what did it entail for you? Was it just administrative or was there also some fun behind it? And you seem to have had some antipathy towards the math department, and I'm not sure where that comes from.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's funny is for part of that time, I was the chair of the math and science departments together. So math and science together.
So there was the revolt.
Math and science, we hang together. Math, you guys aren't mathematicians, right? Okay. So mathematics is a powerful tool for doing science. It's kind of like a
moles. I remember about moles.
Yeah. So you need math in order to do important stuff. But I was not very good in math. Calculus, for example, was very difficult for me because I took calculus in high school and I was very young. I was an accelerated student. So I was like a sophomore or something in this class full of senior women who thought of me as like some kind of a mascot or something. So I was surrounded.
That's terrible.
I'm a young man. I'm a young teenager surrounded by gorgeous older women. Who's going to pay any attention to calculus? Give me a break. I never really learned calculus. I never learned women very well either. But
About the same in calculus, to tell you the truth. Forte.
and you have to really get it to do it. A lot of things, organic chemistry, for example, I barely survived when I was an undergraduate at Boston College. It was tough. And then Ash adopted the International Baccalaureate curriculum in the mid-90s. So in addition to doing the advanced placement, which we always did, we now are also doing the IB. And the IB is from the British. And the British law, it's the best thing. So there has to be a lot of organic in the curriculum for their taste. And I had to like teach it, which meant I now had to learn the damn. Very difficult. So I spent a lot of time staying, as they say, 3 pages ahead of the kids that first year, like trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. But I did manage to get a feel for it and appreciate it in a lot of ways. And for you guys won't appreciate this, but maybe somebody out there will. I went to a number of conferences for chemistry educators, and I got connected with this subset of the American Chemical Society. So it's the chemical educators. And they have a conference every other year, every even year. So there's one this summer that I'll be going to in Kentucky. At any rate, in 2004, I went to this conference and the call went out for people that wanted to be in a rock band. So we formed a chemistry educator rock.
What they called?
That's the best part. That's why this is organic. So here we go. The name of the band is Aldehyde and the Ketones. It's hilariously funny if you again. And our backup singers are Holly and the Esters.
Uh, so yeah, there's a lot of chemical educators I come across in the US, but most of them are in vape shops and they have a very different understanding of the kind of education that they're providing. So the culture here is very strange as it relates to things. It doesn't make sense to me. That's a whole separate discussion. And I guess Oregon is anyway going through its own experiment with chemical education.
Okay. Chemical education indeed. Well, we play every other, and you can imagine since we're a bunch of chemistry nerds, and some of them can actually play very well. I play drums. And from that first get-go, our people loved us because we are nerds like them. And we are on stage and we are playing guitars and we are singing into microphones. And dang it, I'm going to figure out how to dance if it kills me, they said to themselves. And so it's hilarious, but we have a great time. I wrote one song this year where we're closing down. This is it. 20 years of fun and frolic. And it's the last concert.
It sounds awesome. And this is a side, of course, of our teachers that we as students never saw. And I want to ask you whether Richard regaled us a little bit with stories of camp things that happened in theater productions, but he also had the benefit of students who were virtuoso actors who went on to do something interesting and maybe some of them became famous. Does that happen as well for the sciences? Did you see people who obviously stood out as really outstanding students and then went on to things? Have you stayed in touch with people? Or does it not look the same for the sort of your branch of, I don't want to call it real education, but science education?
There you go. Yeah, I'm not as good as Richard and some others at staying in contact with my former students, but there are a few of them, currently are doing excellent research and doing great stuff. Some of them are physicians, some of them are in research. And I know that there's a lot of them I know there's students I had who are terrific and are probably having fabulous careers. I just don't know where they're at. But there aren't Academy Awards for research into, I don't know, the left foot of your anarchist. Science is its own weird thing. One of the fun things that we did with the IB was a project on Tesla. And those who were in the studio audience who went to Tesla will know of which I speak. And it was required by the IB that you had to do something where all the sciences got together and you had a group formed with people from biology and physics and chemistry. And you had to work on a project together and do some kind of research and then say your result. So lots of schools did it poorly. I think we did it really well. And it became a project where our real goal was, okay, so look, like you guys, okay, you're not doing something, you're doing stuff there, but you're going to have people working for you. You're going to come to a situation where you're going to have to deal with a scientific discovery, or you have to deal with your scientists, or somebody's got to hand you some research. And we want you to have a little bit of a taste of what it means to know something in science, how difficult it is to figure out what the heck is going on in the simplest kind of situation. And it really is hard to know. Now, we compressed it into basically 2 days, a half a day, a full day, another half a day. So it's totally unrealistic. But even in that compressed space, it's like, okay, so what do you want to know about this pile of this? So we would go to the mud flats, for example. What do you want to know about this mud? Well, you have to find something. You got 30 minutes before we get on the bus, figure it out. So they would come up with something, and then they would figure out a way to measure something about it. And then we go out the next day, collect data, they do their measuring, analyze the data, and then spend that night writing up the results and putting it out there. Now, we didn't make any great discoveries, but it did walk them through the process of how it is. You see something that's interesting. What the heck's going on? How am I going to know what's going on? What are the variables? How do I control those? What's the question I'm going to ask? And invariably, they would get the results when they wanted to prove that because the wind was blowing, the mud was higher towards the left side of the seat. Their answer was not at all anything that confirmed or denied that. And we said, so here's what happens. When you ask a question of nature, sometimes you get yes, sometimes you get no. Most all the time, you get ask a better question. And that was the message of the project. And we wanted them to leave the island of Tesla. I don't know if you ever went up to Tesla. Great place. With that understanding that science is difficult, it's hard to know anything. And it's really hard to ask the right question that you can figure out the answer to. So when I look at results of, well, like right now, there's a bunch of people who are studying my disease that I have, multiple myeloma, and they're coming up with new drugs and new treatment. And it's really hard to find these drugs and to show that they work and to figure out how to make them work better. It's enormously difficult, and you just got to plug away at it. I'll tell you, one of my favorite stories was this woman who studies whales on the Oregon coast. There's a pod of whales that don't move. They stay there. She was pretty sure that they were eating this particular little shrimp that's very prevalent in this area because they're always hanging around where the shrimp. So now you can say, oh, yes, well, obviously they're eating the shrimp. But you don't know that, do you? How do you know if they're really eating these shrimp? What do you guys think? How are you going to find out if they're really eating these shrimp?
Look at their waste products they're eliminating.
Exactly. You have to collect whale poop and you have to show that there's the remnants of shrimp in whale poop. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but collecting whale poop is actually quite good. She chased these whales around every day for 3 years. 3 years, 3 times 365 days, chasing these whales around in the ocean off the Oregon coast until she finally got a beaker of whale poop. And she has a little canister on the shelf that she points to. And in there were the remnants of brine shrimp. So now she can say, they're eating canned brine shrimp. And here's it. But that's what it takes. That's what it takes. And so can you imagine, like, what did you do today, dear? Well, I tried to collect whale poop and I didn't get any. 3 years? Come on.
Maybe she found some ambergris in the meantime. That's at least rewarding from another perspective.
Yeah.
So
whale trips and runs a museum, makes a little money on the side. So good for her.
I spent most of my career working for a company that makes laboratory balances and precision instruments of all kinds, Mettler, Toledo. And we had lots, Mettler, Toledo. So probably would have had Mettler or Toledo scales and other products. But what I was thinking of as you were describing the approach to science and this questioning and finding better questions is the love-hate relationship I had with many of my colleagues. A lot of hard scientists, a lot of engineers, a lot of chemists, physicists, people who were good scientists. And they were, when it comes to a global public company that has to comply with laws, we had lots of rules and regulations, and I ran our compliance program. Those people could not be made to do anything. They had to be convinced. They had to be explained appropriately, like adults. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what we're trying to achieve. And here's the rationale. They would never just follow a rule because we told them to follow the rule and the CEO said you have to follow the rule. They really did have to be convinced that it was the right thing to do and they understood the reasons why. But that was the hate part. The love part was once they understood it and bought into the rationale, they were perfect in compliance. They were like, okay, I get it. I'm going to follow it. And I never had to worry about them ever after that point. But it was getting over that hurdle of, yeah, I'm going to ask you my 500 questions and make sure I understand why you want me to do this. And if and only if I accept your rationale, I will do it. I respect it. I do understand the approach. And it's good to teach people proper analytical thinking, right? You shouldn't have people who just accept everything, but it's hard to manage a group of such people.
Our problem in the United States of America at the moment, we have a lot of people who aren't very critically thinking about anything. So we're in trouble. But that's another topic for another discussion, I think.
So I wish I'd paid a little bit more attention in my science class, my chemistry class, because I went to a explosive course in my Green Beret training, and we engaged with explosives of which you can buy at a pharmacy if you're stuck in a country. You get the explosive and things like that. So I had to relearn all that stuff. well, I'm not sure you taught me any chemistry or not, but I think there were some things that were related that probably were part of that. But I also got to appreciate we have these time fuses, and you get the time fuses, but you have to test them, and you have to test them from the same source to make sure if you want everything to blow up at the same time, and you get a 1 minute time fuse, you got to get three of them the same length, and it all comes from the same source. Because if you have two different canisters of it, then this one's going to do something different. So having people, like working with people who didn't have a good high school education and trying to explain like, hey, this is why we have to do that, was something I had to do a lot. And other times I'm training people from other countries, didn't even graduate high school to get into their military, or they were recruited into their military mandatorily at 16 or something like that. So I'm like, hey, you have to do this. They're like, hey, yeah, I got it. It's like, no, this is why it's important. And you have to show them. You can't just tell them. And then because I learned the metric system, because I was in Europe, and I don't actually remember ever learning feet and inches that very well while I was in Europe. I would bring that to the military. The military is all about feet, inches, 16th of an inch. How many 16th of an inch are as a time fuse? And I'm like, hey, why don't we measure it in milliliters? Like, because we were trained to do it in our school, and this is what we do, 16th of inches. And I'm like, but I'm pretty sure it's more accurate if you do it in centimeters. Like, there's no way. I was like, oh, well, let's do a competition. And we did a competition, and you have within a couple seconds, and whoever gets it closer to the exact 1 minute wins. And I would win every time against these guys because they went to the military school, taught them feet, inches, 16th of inches, 8th of inches. And I did it in centimeters, and I beat them every time. And I was like, and plus we're teaching people who use the metric system. So why are you going to bring an American measuring device and teach them feet and inches when they use centimeters anyway? So that's my math and science and chemistry story. It's the only thing I got in my life, though.
Good for you. Good for you. Yes. When I started teaching, I had a poster on my wall, metric by 1980.
Oh, what happened?
Battle cry. Yeah. Well, what can I say? It was back in Jeffersonian times. We adopted a decimal, a monetary system instead of whatever that stuff is the British used to use with the farthings and the shillings and I don't even know. Whatever that was. Anyway, so we went to a decimal money system. And they said, and what about this French metric system? What do you think? What do you think? And they said, no, we're not doing that. We're keeping it feet and inches. And I think we're the only ones left doing it anymore.
Well, the British still use different weights, different kind of.
Oh, yeah, they have. I love when they give the weight of rugby players in stone.
Stone. I don't know what stone is.
I think it's about 14 pounds.
I do think pounds are better than kilos, though. They're smaller, and I think they're a little.
Yeah, but you got kilos and you got,
grams. You can work it out.
You just moved the decimal point. How many feet in a mile?
That's a bit like your centimeters versus inches, Randy. You can't have it both ways.
How many feet in a mile? I have no idea.
5,280 feet in a mile. What the heck is that? Where did that come? 5,280? What? You couldn't make it 5,000 even? No. So, and in the metric system, you just slide that decimal back and forth.
I had a terrible moment this year when I realized that 25 yards was not the same as 25 meters. And I had to readjust years of swimming performance. And oh, really? 25? I thought these were meter pools because I came from Europe. I always swam in Europe, and then I came here. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, a yard smaller than a meter by a little bit. Is that right?
Yes. 0.92 or something.
Yes, that's right. 0.92 something. I don't know. It's strange. Hey, one of the things that I was thinking about this, and one of the topics that I wanted to talk about with you guys in terms of, well, let me start with a Freedberg story because Freedberg had some great stories, but I have one about Freedberg that I'll tell. And that is, and this leads into my thing that I want to talk about. You never know what impact you have on people, especially as a teacher. Those people out there who are educators know what I'm saying because it's happened to them like it happened so many times to me. You never really know what it is, what you're saying, what effect it's having, how it's being perceived, and what effect it has on people. And so you've got to be really careful because you could screw up and not. And I have. So I have a story about that. But let me get this Freedberg story first. So Freedberg and I were friends. I love the guy. He's hilarious. And you would never realize that because he was way over there in the theater and I was way up in the chem lab. He's like doing that stuff that Freedberg does. And I'm up there going, yes, well, we're going to anticipate the enthalpy of the reaction of the. So why could these two guys even know of each other, never mind be friends? But we were. So this poor kid who obviously, like most people, didn't think we knew each other. It must have been a study hall or something like that. And he was coming late from Friedberg's class. And Freedberg had grabbed some piece of lumber or something and written, well, it's play the class, right, wait. And so this kid shows up at my door with this piece of wood. And I look at the kid, well, this is just acceptable. And I was having him on. I was just a moment. So I sat down and I wrote this long note to, dear Mr. Freed, I'm sure you must be aware that there are proper forms within this educational institution for the assigning of lateness to students who should come to my important class. And went on and on. I had a great time. And I gave it to this kid and I sent him with the piece of wood in this note back to Freedberg. Now, the poor kid probably read the note on the way. It's like, oh, geez, oh my God, I'm so screwed. And of course, he gets down there, gives it to Freedberg. Freedberg reads it and knows exactly what's going on. In other words, I'm having him on. I'm giving him all this academic crap from way up there in the science. And he says, not have it. So he turns around and he grabs a foam letter U and a screwdriver and a screw. And he screws the screw into the U and hands it to the kid and says, go back to Mr. Kelley's. So now this kid who was already worried is really worried because not only does he didn't have the right path. I don't think Freedberg ever even saw what these forms look like. Who cares? But now he's going to go back up to his chemistry teacher with this. He's got a screw and a U and he's going to give it to him. And I don't know what I could be doing. I may be in detention for the rest of my life. And the poor kid arrives at my door and says, look, I have nothing to do with this. I don't know anything about this. This is what Freedberg gave me this. I don't know anything about this. And I look at it and I start laughing hilariously. I put it on the bulletin board as a sign of a badge of honor. And I said, it's okay, kid. It's all right. Freedberg? Yeah. I
Was in the new Wassenaar thing? Was the theater in the compound?
In the compound. Yes. Yeah. The new theater in the new Cameroon. But anyway, yeah, over the years, a number of them, and I alluded to this before we started. My first week in 1984, teaching in this weird place in Scheveningen, the first thing I would do usually, instead of like, here are the rules of the game, we have to have no part of it, I would do an experiment the first day. And the one I did was putting a piece of aluminum foil into a beaker of copper sulfate. And then there's a redox reaction that happens. And it's fun because the blue color of the copper sulfate is blue. It goes away. The aluminum foil disappears. Red copper metal shows up. There's heat given off. It's exothermic. There's steam. Great. It's a lot of fun. And the whole idea is observations. You're supposed to observe what's going down and write down so that's a nice little thing. It's fun to do on the first day. So the thing is, you give the kids the beaker and the stuff and it's all ready to go. And then to take this piece of aluminum foil and roll it up into a ball, but not too tight. Because if it's too tight, then there's not enough surface area and it doesn't work. So it has to be loose. So I'm going around and they're doing this stuff. And this young lady is rolling the thing up. And I said, no, you have to, is yours loose or are you loose? No, it's okay. I said something like that. I said, I'm not sure that I said it, but that's what she heard. So this is my first day. I'm 31 years old and I've just called this young teenage girl loose in front of all of her friends. Nice move, Kelley. Fortunately, I was saved by a classmate of hers who came up at lunchtime. Miss Kelley, this so-and-so thinks that you said something, I don't know but you got a big problem. So he was really cool to head me off. And then the next day I apologized and tried to say, I didn't mean to say that. If I said that, I didn't remember saying that. But if I did, I'm really sorry. And I just, boy, you got to be so careful.
It was the last mistake you ever made, right, Tom?
Oh. If only. Oh, if only. There's another time, happier story, at that same school. I would be doing stuff after school. And then on my way home out in the parking lot, the soccer fields or football fields, as they call them here, were right next to the parking lot. So I go over and watch a little bit of the game. And one of my students was a defenseman on the soccer team. And then there was this kid who was from the track team who ran like the wind. And so they made him a striker on the right side. And the whole idea is if you can get the ball to him, he's going to be on top of the goalie, and away we go. So that's the whole point, is to get the ball to him. And if you're the opposing team, the whole idea is keep anybody from getting the ball to that. That's basically the way the soccer game worked in that era. Anyway, so I'm out watching, and this student of mine, the defenseman, he gets the ball and he nails this beautiful arching pass that goes down the right side, curves in, falls at the feet of the speeding striker, who 2 touches back of the goal. And the crowd goes wild. And I yell, "Hey, that's Chris's goal. That's Chris's goal." Chris, the kid who kicked the, okay. Then I watch a little bit more of the game. I go home. 10 years later, I meet up with somebody who knows this kid. And I phone call or something. And we're chatting away. He says, "Mr. Kelley," because they always call you Mr. Kelley, no matter how old anybody is. "Mr. Kelley, you remember that soccer game? Soccer games. You said it was Chris's goal." "What?" "Yeah, I played that pass and his goal, and you said Chris's goal. That meant a lot to me." Oh my God. This kid's been hanging on to that one thing that I said his whole life. Who knows his situation, never felt like anybody really noticed him or something. I don't know. You can read in what you want. I was just going, "Hey, good, man, Chris's goal. Yeah." And look at that, 10 years later. Amazing. And that's happened a couple of times where, a kid I had in study hall at Centennial who was he was one of those bad kids. Bad kids. You gotta watch out for this. And so he was going to be in my study hall. And he said, "Oh, Kelley, watch out for that guy." I was, "Oh, okay." But he came in, sat down, and I didn't treat him any different than anybody else. I didn't know him for about, he hasn't done anything to me. So we just hung out and did our thing. And again, a couple of years later, I'm walking into school on a Saturday. This kid's there, and he says, "Hey, Mr. Kelley, hey, you remember me?" I said, "I don't know what you said." "Oh, I had you in study hall. Everybody thought I was a really rotten kid, and I was pretty bad. I did a lot of stuff, but I never did anything in your class. I never did anything in your stuff because you didn't start out thinking I was going to do something. So I figured, hey, this guy's all right, and I'm not going to cause any trouble. So I want to thank you for that. It turned things around for me. I realized if I wasn't doing stuff like that to get attention all the time, I could do other things to get attention. So thanks a lot." Jesus, what the hell? But so you never realize the little things that you do, the impact that they have, especially dealing with teenagers in those formative years of their life. I know what I was like when I was a teenager, and every day was a year long. So many experiences crammed into such a short space of time. And those little things make such a huge difference. It's so key, so important.
Those are really good stories. I think there's a lot of similarities between the military and the educational profession, especially like between high school and college. We're getting the same teenagers, people 16, 17 coming in the military. I still remember my drill sergeants' names, and I spent 5 months with them over 35 years ago, and I still know their names. I still remember their names. And then a lot of people and officers and commissioned, non-commissioned officers in my career who I could point to, and like, I learned a lot of stuff from that guy, and it reflected on my leadership later on in life. And occasionally people look me up, thank me for things I did too. So I understand exactly what you're saying, Tom. You never know what you're going to do or say that's going to affect someone.
And there are some people out there in various professions that are just mean, and they take, I don't know, some kind of pleasure in being mean to people. And it's so hurtful. It's so wrong. Boy, I just heard a story on NPR about a private school it's the Diana's family. Golly, what's their last name? Diana.
So Wales, Diana who?
This is Diana who died in the car crash.
Harry, Prince Harry. And Megan or something.
Oh, those are her children.
Yeah.
And
Right. So
the brother, I'm trying to remember the last name of the
William.
man.
No,
So,
William Charles. Who are we talking about?
no, not those are the kids. I'm talking about the
Diana. He's talking about Princess Diana.
Princess
Yes.
Diana. So Princess Diana, who was killed in the car crash, their mother, but her brother was sent to a horrible private school, really horrible, terrible people. And he's just written a book about it. And I just think, oh my gosh, what a horrible thing to do to these young children at such a point in their lives when they're so vulnerable. Because even when you try to do the right thing, like make sure the aluminum foil isn't rolled too tightly, you still screw up. So,
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on. One, you're, as you guys have said, you're getting people at an impressionable point in their lives. But I think, as you've already observed, the impact that you can have on somebody isn't limited to them when they're teenagers, right? It can happen at any time. But the other thing is that you also probably can't take too much on yourself because people read things into situations that aren't there, right? So your story demonstrates both aspects of that. It is important what you say, and it's important to behave knowing that your behavior and your words will have an impact. But at the same time, people will misconstrue and read things into a situation that aren't there. And that's not your fault. I don't know. I think the only thing you can do is be responsible for your own action. And maybe then if you're on the receiving end of a situation, to show a little bit of tolerance and humility and not always assume that something was intended. Maybe it wasn't. And there's a tendency, I think, in today's discourse for people to always assume everything is directed at them and intended a certain way. Might not have been. Sometimes an offhand remark really is just an offhand remark, and it's okay. You can say that hurt my feelings, but now I'm going to move on.
yeah, right. Very true. Very true. Yeah, we had a lot of fun over the years. I had some great colleagues that I worked with in all departments, but certainly in the science department. I consider myself blessed that I worked with Jim Tissell and Paul Terry, a couple of names. Paul is no longer with us, but Jim's retired and lives in Minnesota. But Jim was physics, Paul was biology, and I was chemistry. And we called ourselves the three male science teachers, which is pretty close to the Three Stooges sometimes. We had some times, but I would often think, boy, are you, Kelley? You are the luckiest. Jeez, look at this. These guys are wonderful human beings. They are fine educators, and they have different strengths and attitudes than you do, and different personalities, but we work so well together at educating these kids. And it's just, you're so lucky because it could be bad. You could be fighting each other and like, those are my beakers. Oh, you could be doing that kind of stuff. And there are departments where that happens, where people are just at each other's throats and the kids suffer as a result. We were always having a good time.
So it's interesting to hear you say that. And as students, when we talk amongst each other, we almost universally, the people that I know and that I think, Randy, you have talked to, feel like our education at Ash was special and wonderful. And in part due to the special and wonderful teachers that we had. So it's the setting, it's everything, but it was certainly also the education, which felt really cool. And do you think there was something that the school administration did well? What was it that attracted and kept such high quality people there for such extended periods of time? Was there any thoughts you've had about that as to how it worked? Maybe sometimes a good setting is just self-reinforcing. People could see that it was a great environment, so good people wanted to stay in it. But what do you think were some of the contributing factors?
I think in that era, so we're talking at the time you were there, mid 80s into the 90s, international schools were quite different than they can be today, I think. And the key would be to having the right person at the top. And in your day and in those early days, it was Gail Schopert. Now, Gail Schopert, the way he approached the American school was you find really good teachers. And they're really good, maybe not because they wrote a book about education. They're really good because they're Freedberg, who's a crazy man, but he's really cool. He's a good crazy. And you hire them, and then you stay the heck out of their way. You let them do what they know how to do. You need to write down some more curriculum objectives. No. Sometimes people get lazy and they didn't work as hard as they should have. But most of the time, we appreciated the freedom to play to our strengths and to deliver really quality stuff. And everybody did it a little differently. If you had history with this person as opposed to history with that person, history was entirely different. They might both say you had U.S. history or European history, but there was nothing similar about them. But you did get an education, and you got it from somebody who was passionate about the things that they taught. And so that kind of carried through, I think, to the students. And in the end, for example, James, you're dealing in precision balances, and Randall, you're in the military. The fact that you may not exactly know the dates of Charlemagne's rule does not come up that often. But your ability to critically think about something and to work hard on something that you're passionate about, that's important. And that's not a curriculum item, but that is what those teachers, many of my colleagues, did for their students. I've always thought that there's a student for every teacher and a teacher for every student. When I taught at Centennial, we had one of those classic English teachers. We're talking black dress, the hair, and that kind of the booty face that she just like, if you screwed up your grammar, she was going to kill you. One of those teachers. And I would think, oh boy, I don't know. How do people survive that class? But I would walk by her room at the end of the day, and there would be 7 or 8 students in there talking with her after school because they thought she was the best thing that's ever happened in their lives. And I thought, okay, perfect. And that's important because those kids needed to somebody who, spoke their crazy language, whatever it was. And she was there to provide that for them. So there's somebody for everybody. And it's great if you can have a school where you have lots of different kinds of educators that know what they're doing and are passionate about what they're doing. Paul used to do the bee dance. Did you ever have Paul Terry? Either of you guys? No?
I don't remember the bee dance.
I don't know if you know this, but bees communicate like they find a flower and they go back to the hive. You got to tell everybody where the flower is. And they don't have maps. They don't have Garmin. So they have to communicate where the flower is and how far away it is and all that. And they do it through a very intricate dance where they wiggle their rear end and they march back and forth. And I couldn't tell you exactly how it works. Paul would know. And he was famous. They would, please do the bee dance. And so he would imitate a bee walking back and forth, wiggling his butt and pacing out where this flower was the poem. And yeah, it's terrific. That's just terrific.
I think there's nothing wrong with a teacher who is demanding. And in fact, it's a sign that the teacher cares about the students, that they expect a lot of them. And sure, it's hard work and you got much more involved classes and more homework. But to know that the teacher cares enough to go through that work themselves and demand it of you that's a very different environment than if it's just another class of 300 kids and I got to get them through and I haven't updated my materials in 30 years. And that's a very different feeling. So it's not that students don't want to work. I think people do respond well when you have high expectations of them, because that's a sign of respect, actually. If I expect a lot of you and I expect you to be able to do it, yeah, I trust you. I think we might have benefited for sure from the individuality that you're describing. And first of all, the 2 factors of an administration that had a talent for finding good teachers, and then this wisdom to get out of their way and give them some flexibility. But also, it was a relatively small school, right? I wonder whether it's as easy to do that at scale. If you really do have a class of 2,000 students, I guess you can do it, but it's just so much harder.
Oh yeah. Our class sizes were 20 max, maybe. We had a commitment to deliver an AP program. So that meant that we always had AP chemistry, AP biology, AP physics, even if there were only 5 or 6 kids.
Randy pretends to be a dumb guy, but Randy got through 4 or 5 AP classes. A lot of people benefited from those AP classes and started off college with at least a semester in the pocket, which was great.
Yes.
None of mine were science though, or math.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
If you promise to always use the metric system, I'll let you off. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It was a great place. And it's still a good school. There's a lot of good education going on there, but it's different now. You can't just let teachers go do stuff now like they used to. Like they let us. It's not on that school.
I have a question because I went back to my trader school. I went back to ASL about 8 years ago. And so Wassenaar, did you see it before and after?
Well, I was there for 9/11.
Oh, okay. I'd be interested in how the school reacted during 9/11, to tell you the truth. Like and then did they up security after 9/11? Because in ASL, like all of a sudden it was locked down. There's security guards, there's metal detectors. I don't know how Ash was.
Yeah. Before 9/11, we had an open campus. The neighborhood kids used to come and play on the playground after school. And it was just, yeah, it's a school like any other school. And I don't know if you remember Heidelberg College. Oh, no, you wouldn't because you never went there. The school out in Wassenaar was close to a Dutch high school, Heidelberg College. It was near the AVF, if you remember the AVF out in Wassenaar. But anyway, so the day after 9/11 happened, I remember distinctly we came into school and there were hundreds and hundreds of white roses that had been delivered. Each one of them contained a note written by a student at Heidelberg College to American schools, saying whatever they wanted to say about this horrible event that had taken place. I mean, it was absolutely breathtaking that they had done this for their neighbor kids. It was terrific. But of course, as you say, because of that event, the embassy identified the American school as, if you're a terrorist, this is a great target. So if you're going to do something, look at this place, it's wide open. There's no fences, people running all over the place. So they convinced the school to put up fences, and we had security guards. Now there's a real elaborate security system for getting in the school. I can't get in there unless somebody comes there to meet me and vouches for me that I am indeed not a horrible person, although I might be. Who knows? And so it had a big effect. Same kind of thing that you're talking about at ASL. It's unfortunate. It's too bad, but it's the way of the world, I guess.
Well,
We can't end on a depressing note like that. We got to come up with a happier story.
Well, I don't know.
I was going to,
It's a happy story for the poor person that was involved. But I told you about the 3 male science teachers.
Yes,
And
yeah.
one of our crowning achievements was this, I mentioned it earlier, the trip to Texel, which I'm very proud of. And it was I said, hey, let's go to Texel. Because the first year we went to this castle and it was a disaster. Nobody had anything. Nothing worked right. And it was nuts. So I said, hey, come on, we'll go to Texel. And I was the department chair at the time. And I think there was a new principal that came in. And so Tissel always said, you were so clever. You did it. Because the new principal came in and I just said, yeah, so we spend 10,000 euros every year. We go to a test. Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah. And like, it never happened before, but that's it. So we would take 3 days. We take the kids out of English class for 3 days and go to Tessel. English teachers love this for this. And take all the IB kids and do our project. And it really was, I thought it was a great thing. We had to develop it as we went. So things would come up and then the 3 of us would stand there. And there's pictures from the early years of us standing there like this. What are we going to do about this? And we'd be thinking about like, what's good for the kids, what makes sense practically, what's important for the idea of the project, because again, we're trying to give these people who are not going to be scientists an experience where they understand a little bit of what it means to do science. And so those were always the things playing in our heads. And it was so much fun to work with these other 2 guys at developing that. All the little things like we did this, we did that. And one of the inventions was that on the bus, we have, you're in your group. And one of the jobs in the group member is to know where everybody else in the group is. So we would do roll call on the bus. Group 1, we're here. Group 2, we're here. Group 3, Joe, where is here? Where's Joe? I don't know. Find Joe. I don't know. Now, why did we do that? We did that because one year we stayed in these hostels, which were sometimes a little hostile, but they were places that the Dutch kids go to, bunk beds, French fries and soup and stuff. And they'd run around and do stuff on test because those schools do a lot of that kind of stuff in the spring. And we were doing our own thing, but we were staying in one of these hostels. Well, if you can believe this, the hostel door, the rooms to secure them, they had a key lock on the outside. So when it's time to go, okay, yeah, you get all your bags. I'll be back, and out of the room, lock the door, turn the key at the front desk, we all get on the bus, and we're driving along, having a wonderful time, heading out to the old mud flats. And then somebody goes, hey, where's that? You remember that new girl? Oh, yeah, new girl. She just transferred. No, where's new girl? New girl? Anybody? Where's the new girl? Where's the new girl? Well, the new girl was locked into a room back in the hostel because she was, I don't know where she was, over the corner. Nobody really knew her that well yet. And the rest of the girls in the room, they got their backpack, went out the door, locked the door, turned the key in, and she can't get out of the room. There's no way to get out. Thank God it didn't like burn down or something. She'd be trapped in there. So we go back, we get the key, we unlock her. She's in there sitting on the bed. You forgot about me. And so we said, okay, we have to fix that. So we had one of our Three Stooges meetings. We said, what are we going to do? We're going to have somebody who knows where everybody is. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a roll. We're on the bus and we're going to find where is everybody? Because we're not doing this again. So that's kind of the way the Three Stooges operated. Yeah.
Well, the school trips were definitely memorable, and it is really remarkable to think of the things that we got up to and the places we went, and that it all mostly worked out. I have to say, it's a bit of providence.
Tom, James and I went Euro railing after we graduated, and I don't think you remember this, James, or maybe it was me and Bill. Anyway, we were in this hostel, and I think it was just Bill and I, and you guys went out early, and the hostels closed down at a certain time for cleaning, and everyone else would be out. But we didn't understand that. We got locked in the hostel at like 10 o'clock in the morning or something. Yeah, I don't think you weren't there, right, James? You were with us, but you had got out early, I think, to go see some sights. Bill and I put our backpacks on, jumped out the second drawer window on this poor guy's car, and dented his car up. But that's the only way we could get out.
So there it is. So it happens all the time in these hostels.
Yeah, they lock up at a certain time. Everyone has to get out at a certain time because they have to do cleaning, they have to wash the sheets and everything. I went my wife hiking across Europe and through hostels on the Camino de Santiago.
Okay. Oh, one of my college friends just walked part of that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, we got our questions now, right, James?
Questions? I thought we already did all the questions.
We did a bunch of questions. Have you got them handy, Randy?
I don't have them. You know by heart.
I probably do know most of them. I'm going to open them up just to be on the safe side. How did you get yourself to school? Did you walk, ride a bike? How close were you? Do you remember?
I rode a bike most often. We bought a house in the days when the school was in The Hague. We lived in The Hague, so it was easy to bike from Stuyvesant over to their high school. It wasn't a problem at all. So I biked all the time there. But when I came back, we lived in The Hague and the school was out in Wassenaar. So a much longer bike ride until we bought a house in the next town over, Voorschoten. And then that was an easy bike in. Most of the time I biked, which was faster than driving. The great thing about Europe is that everybody has at least one bike, probably three. Some people have cars, but we really don't want you to have a car. We don't want you to be driving. You shouldn't be driving. You should be on a bus or a train or on your bike. You should. Going into places like Leiden with a car is foolish because you can't get anywhere where you want to be because the roads are too small and there's too many bike lanes and there's no place to park. The point is, don't take the car. What are you doing in the car? Get on the train. What are you doing?
Not only that, but how much?
I lived in Leiden I commuted to The Hague every day for school.
And what did you take the bus?
I took a bus, train, tram.
Yeah, right. That's right. That works so well.
Exactly. It's not an afterthought. It's built with that in mind. And so are the bike paths, right? It's absolutely easy to ride a bike or a moped if that's what it was absolutely encouraged. So nice to hear that you availed yourself of those modalities. I think I know the answer to this next question based on something you wrote, but we'll ask it anyway for listeners. And that is frites with or without mayonnaise. And what's your position on peanut butter sauce?
It's pita sauce. It's the best thing in the world. Pita sauce. And the places that had the best pita sauce, you had to frequent. The French fries, first of all, are supreme. They're Belgian fries, actually. And there's some process they cook them a little bit and then they don't cook them and then they cook them I don't know what they do. But they're really good. And the pinto sauce is Indonesian peanut sauce. A little spicy, not too sweet. It's the best. I never got into the mayonnaise thing.
I was a mayonnaise guy.
You were a mayonnaise guy?
Yeah.
Fried sauce. Well,
Still am.
wow.
And I guess we allow all opinions on this one because it is, of course, a matter of taste. As long as you say you appreciate the treats to begin with, then we're okay with whatever you put on them or nothing. This is the Passionately Wrong podcast. And part of what we try to explore is how to help people avoid being passionately wrong. And of course, learning how to think analytically and what you try to impart to your students, whether or not they became scientists was probably certainly part of that. But drawing from any part of your life or your experience as a teacher, if you saw people who made mistakes or people who avoided mistakes, have you drawn any lessons from what are some things that help people not be wrong more often? That's maybe what we'll lead it with. Any lessons learned that you can share with us now and share with listeners?
Well, boy, I wish I had given this some thought. Probably would come up with a real good answer. Yeah. I've been writing stuff for my family, been writing my memoirs. My daughter gave me this thing. It's one of those, you probably heard of these things where you write something every week. You get somebody old in the family, tell all the family stories, and then they publish them in a book and they put it on a shelf and then somebody throws it out 3 generations. But anyway, one of the things I wrote was I advised to the generation, and I could pull something from there. One thing is that family is family, that family is very important, that you may not like Uncle Fred. We know that, but he's your Uncle Fred. And when Uncle Fred needs you to go mow his lawn, you go mow his lawn because his family, and that's what you're doing. And I've had a lot of experience in my life growing up. My father died when I was 7 months old, and my mother died when I was 13. So my oldest brother, Ed, who was 9 years older than him, became the patriarch of the family. And he got married when I was in high school. And I spent my junior and senior year living with him and his brand new wife up in Massachusetts. So you can imagine how wonderful that was to be newly married and have a little teeny son wrecking your car, smelling up your house, and all that stuff. Now, why do you do that? You do that because family is family, and you don't mess with it. You don't say, well, he took the hit, and he did that his whole life. He took care of me his whole life because family is. I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say that's important. Where you make a mistake is not doing that, is thinking that family's not important. They share, I don't know, that's something intangible, the stories that go back, the bond, the common experience, the common ancestors, the approach, the history, those things that really bind you all together. And it's important to recognize that. And I think you turn your back on it at peril, because it really makes you lonely. And I know that I can go to Boston and I can call up Elaine and go, hey, you want to have lunch? Yeah. Now, she may not want to have lunch. I'm her relative. And so you do stuff for your family.
No, that's perfect. That's a very human answer, actually. And it's one that ties well with the theme of everything we've been discussing. It is indeed shared experiences that create the foundation for understanding and appreciation. And if we felt that strongly for coming together for a couple of years at school, like we had been discussing, imagine how many more opportunities for those sorts of things you have with your family. And Randy, I know that happens as well for people who serve together in the military, from everything I read and heard you and your colleagues talking about. So yeah, that's a great answer. Don't turn your back on those shared experiences in that family, wherever they come.
I think of those students at Ash as being a real family. Talk about people with lots of different backgrounds and from all over the world. And in your era, you probably know Andrew Enskine.
Yes.
Yep. So can you do a call out and tell them to come on our podcast? We've been trying to do that.
Oh, well, I don't see them that often, but there's one example of that is a Palestinian and a Jew.
Yeah.
And they meet at Ash in elementary school, and they were at each other's weddings.
They were college roommates.
I just
Hey, Randy, maybe that's the way we have to do it. We'll get Colin to come on first, and then Andrew will have to come.
There you go. There it is.
Or we'll do them together.
They were like freaking crack, those two kids. By the time I was thick as thieves, they called me the man who never said no, because I was terribly afraid of my kids. I would say, so, well, what's the what's the atomic mass of oxygen? It said 27. I go, well, I know 27 is a possible answer. I wouldn't say, no, it's 16, you moron. It's right on the board. So I would never say no. Well, let's think about this a moment. There's a man who never
Is there
says,
another choice?
geez, what a pair. Yes, we have to get them on. All right. Thanks so much, you guys. This was really fun.
Hey,
I
we
appreciate
appreciate you reaching out, and it was been a pleasure, and I'm sure it's going to be enjoyable for everyone who watches and listens to this. We appreciate you so much taking the time.
You bet. And it was fun for me and to all my former students out there. Thanks for the memories. I had a lot of fun. It was a good time. And I hope you learned a little bit of chemistry along the way. Who knows?
Never know when you have to blow something.
Yeah, right. Blow stuff.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.